I would say Chinese and Americans are very much alike. Very
Is
much
it?
alike. Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
absolutely. They both love their country. They're all entrepreneurs. They all work very hard. And, they're, even if they go live in another country, they're still American. They're still Chinese. That comes first. Whereas Canadians, I think, we're a little bit less, patriotic and stuff like that. And that's maybe because we pay so much taxes and we're bitter about it. So,
What do you think, like, the biggest misconception about China in the world, in the West? Let's put it this way.
people think it's very controlled. It isn't. There's so many people. That's impossible to control that many people. And I would say that the idea that there's probably some camera watching you at every time, and there's a soldier at a corner with a scowl, and no one walks around happy.
Yeah.
No, people in China are very happy. They're Chinese. They're living in their own country, and they enjoy the food. They enjoy the lifestyle. Now, with that said, I'm sure there's people who are having hard times there, who are living in the outskirts of the cities and smaller cities, that life isn't easy for them, but they don't know what's on the outside either. Other than, like, not mentioning a couple of things like Taiwan or, some sort of Tiananmen Square, there's no issues. As a foreigner, it's just like any country you go to. There's people that like foreigners in their country, and there's people that don't. But the majority of Chinese are very welcoming. They're very, very kind. Some of the kindest people I've ever met in my life are Chinese. People would invite you on the street, come to their house, rich, poor, doesn't matter. And you go there and they give you the best that they have. You sit at some guy's house, very wealthy guy, he'll pull out a $5,000 bottle of whiskey, and he'll watch you drink it. He won't even drink any, and you go to, you hang out with the taxi drivers or something like that, having beers in front of 7-Eleven, and, they're fun, they're cordial, they have a good laugh, and they want to communicate. I think, that's one thing about Chinese, they're very open.
Yeah.
And, people joke around that they do ask like the same questions, like, where are you from? How much money you make? Do you sleep with a lot of Chinese girls? Like, because they have misconceptions about us, right? So that's quite, interesting about China. As for like, the government or like work and stuff like that, yeah, of course you have to go through bureaucracy, but you have to do that in any other country. And in China, they're quite, I would say, 15 years ago, they were quite like nonchalant about everything. And now as they're developing their bureaucracy as well. Yeah, I think that's the big misconception. I think that people think China is just out to get the West. I don't really think they're out to get the West. I think they're out to put their foot out into the world and make sure that no one kicks them back. 1.2 million people, whatever you want, billion people, sorry. And I think they just want to have a piece of the pie and enjoy life. Governments aside, I would say the U.S. government, the Chinese government, both have sinister plots against each other and things like that. But as a whole, as the people, they're just as nationalistic as Americans.
So you didn't feel like restricted living there, or like constantly watched, or like being like
no,
having like a freedom?
I would say the frustrations that I had in China were also caused by me.
Yeah.
I did live there for 14 years, and my Chinese is quite poor. I mostly learned Chinese. I did study Chinese, but I don't know, maybe I didn't have the right attitude to learn it as well, and relied on my wife a little bit. But when I had kids, they spoke slower, and they were like, childish, so I can learn more. I can understand what people are saying, but I have a hard time entering a conversation. And that caused me issues where I would go to a bank or I have to do something. And of course, if I can't speak the language, then it's frustrating. However, like if I spoke the language better, I would have had an easier time. There are restrictions in a sense. Like as a worker, I was paying 25% of my salary in taxes and 20%, and I didn't really feel I got any of that back, in services from the government. However, if I went to the hospital, they would even, I would say they would treat me even better than the Chinese, because they would run and get somebody who spoke English. They would panic. They would see me in panic, and they'd run to get somebody, and then that person would stay with me like a ghost. And take me around, and so a Chinese person wouldn't get that service. But if I went to a bank, I have restrictions how much money I can send and things like that. But it's like in any country, I think if you don't speak the language, you're restricting yourself. There are times when it felt that foreigners were being targeted, and I would say it felt in 2016 it started to be like that, and the government changed, of course. But I don't think it was like a mandate. I just felt that things were changing, and I'm not criticizing the government or anything, but I would say like I said, when I first came to China, it felt like the Wild West. You can pretty much do anything you want. You know, people, and you can go online and buy steroids if you want. You can go online and buy whatever you wanted to buy on, and like, you know, it's quite like the Wild West. I can't. It was freer than any place I've ever been. Like what you can do, you know, with a 50, 60, 70 bucks in your pocket even, and go out and have a great time with friends and stuff like that. But of course, you know, as any nation develops, you know, they start seeing a morality and changing like that, you know.
Yeah.
So they start clamping. I think that's the biggest things I've noticed within China lately.